Hello, my lovelies. I'm Ginny O, the author with no last name. And today we're having cookies and cocoa time with Ginny as I put on my development editor hat and talk to you about a piece of advice I've been seeing going around mostly Tumblr lately because of book talk, no less. Today's episode is brought to you by the letter T for Tumblr, TikTok, and some traditional books I've read recently. Before we begin, there is a disclaimer for this piece of advice. If you are writing fanfiction, this does not apply to you. Please, do whatever you want. Get down with your bad self. If you want to publish, whether indie publishing or traditionally publishing, then today's video is something I would like you to take into consideration. I don't say this to be mean. I don't say this to be a party pooper. I don't even say this to gatekeep or be elitist. I have absolutely no high ground in this matter, okay? I have written lots and lots of fan fiction, and I have written, my own IP, which I queried and didn't get a traditional publishing contract, and have independently published myself. And, before you say, Ginny, you're just going to be saying a whole bunch of stuff and not offer any help, okay? I'm a development editor. You can go to my website, email me, and hire me as a development editor. I do specialize in science fiction and fantasy, and what a development editor does is we talk with you through using what you have as a vision for your story. I will go with you over, I'll read your book, and I'll go with you over characterization. I'll go over world building and plot structure, pacing, tension, that type of stuff with you. This is after your first or second draft. That is what a development editor does. And if you are wanting to go into the traditional publishing industry, given the state of the industry right now, you will need to have on hand either somebody like me and or a writing group that you trust. Just like a random writing group at the library is probably not going to help you. You need a group of people who know your genre, love your genre, and understand your writing style and vision to help you. Or you need to learn how to edit yourself, which is where I have a post-fiction guide on my website called 16 Signs You're Not Ready to Self-Publish and Other Things You Should Know. Where I go over 16 different very common issues I see in self-published books. 80% of the self-published books I've read need an edit, not a review. And I also go over things in it like writing romantic chemistry, how to do a good plausible kidnapping story, the two cakes theorem, and things like that. Industry is such a place right now where if you get one edit out of your editor associated with the publisher, that's all you're gonna get. You might get lucky and get an agent who likes editing, but most of them just don't have time for it. So you have to either have your own crew or you have to learn to do it yourself. Okay? So that's kind of where we're sitting in this cookies and cocoa time with Ginny right now. Those are the disclaimers. All right, so what is today's advice? So the advice I've been seeing going around lately does not have any caveats to it, but I'm going to add a caveat at the end. So the advice is write what makes you happy. Write whatever you want. Write what you love. It's a good piece of advice. Because if you're writing stuff you hate, I mean, it's going to show in your work. If you write stuff that you don't like, your work is just not going to feel authentic. And I agree with it. I agree. You should write what you want to write. You should write what you love. You should write what makes you happy. And if you finish that first draft, you should be really proud of it. I'm really proud of yourself because you have finished a book, and not many people do that. Here's my advice. Write what you love, write what makes you happy, write what you want, and then edit. Put it in a drawer, come back after 2 months, or hand it out to your friends, or hand it to that editor you have on hand, and edit. Okay. Editing is not about you. Okay? It's not about, oh, my book is wrong, it's bad, it's not following any of the writing guidelines, blah, blah, blah. No. It's not about you. Editing your book is for everybody else. It's making your book consumable to somebody who's not sitting in your head, sharing a psychic connection between your right and left sides of your brain. Readers cannot read your mind. They only know what you show, tell, and have the characters do in your book. And so it is important for you to realize that your first draft is just your first draft. Your first draft should be you just getting the story out if you want to tell it. Just get it out. Get it all out. All out on the page. Okay? When you edit your book, you're taking the story you want and refining it so everybody else will have a good time reading it. That's what editing is for. It's not about your ego, it's not about your creative process, it's not about your creativity or your idea being bad. It's taking your idea and refining it so that everybody, in your writing target market will read it and understand it and enjoy it. Okay? You want people to love your characters and love your setting and to love the plot line just as much as you do. You want to get people excited. And to do that, you've got to edit. And I'm not talking grammar and spelling, so that's a good thing to edit, or making sure you don't use the word a singular word too many times. This is not going out and being like, oh, I hate he said and she said, so I'm going to change it out and for all these other words. Readers skip over he said and she said, so edit when you're doing he said and she said stuff. Edit it when you're tired, because he said and she said, your eyes skip right over it and it doesn't register with your brain. But if you have characters growling and whimpering and shouting and all the time, it gets very tiring to read. He said and she said are just kind of like nice little flat pauses. Okay. And if you have gestures everywhere, then your characters are going to be super fidgety. That's why he said and she said exists. Just to keep things smooth and keep the reader from getting tired. That's it. Maybe you think said is dead. Okay, that's fine. Just, if you're not using said, your readers are going to get really tired after a while. So So, like, editing is not about you. It's about everybody else you want to read the book. You want them excited. So, I have a list here of some stuff I've kind of noticed that has been coming up around this piece of advice in particular, and because of TikTok stuff mostly. And this is going to be a couple weeks in the past because I'm recording this like on the 10th or something, so it will be a couple weeks in the past. I am not going to be putting up on the screen the pieces, the write what you want, what you love, you know, everything. It's okay to write pulp fiction type of pieces of advice that I've been seeing, mostly because I don't feel like I don't want to call out people. I don't want people's feelings to be hurt. It's just important to me that, yes, I want you to write what you love and what you want and what makes you happy, and then I want you to edit it. I want you to edit it so other people can be engaged and happy while reading it and get past chapter 5. Very important. You want them to get to the end of the book. So, writing rules, writing advice, my personal thing is that they are guidelines. And writing guidelines do exist, particularly for traditional publishing, for a reason. You, if you are a debut author, are not special, okay? You cannot bend and break the rules like an established author like George R.R. Martin or Brandon Sanderson. You can't do that because they're just going to look at your book and they're going to toss it. They're just going to be like, back in the slush. You know, it's going to go from slush to the trash. That's what's going to happen. They're going to send you a polite little email of, this book is not for me. Thank you for submitting. Okay. So these writing advice, these writing guidelines exist so that you can convey your story in a way people will be able to understand it, be able to engage with it, and will be able to keep turning the pages. So, like, in marketing, they're doing a lot of marketing on tropes. And, you know, when you market on tropes, it doesn't tell you anything about, you know, the plot or the characters or, you know, the conflicts or anything like that, or the themes. Tropes are tropes. They're not plots. They're not genres. So, yeah, saying that the book is enemies to lovers, you know, might tell you that there's this kind of push and pull romance going on, but it's not going to tell you about the real plot of the book because a lot of, you know, enemies to lovers are being misrepresented. But so it's okay to have tropes in your story because people like them, but you have to understand that these tropes are not, in most cases, you know, a strong warrior woman trope or you know, a height trope or some sort of character tropes are not going to give you plots. Character tropes and archetypes aren't going to automatically give you a plot. So you need to have a goal for the story. The characters want something, okay? They will make decisions that change lives, aka have movement, to get to that goal, to what they want. And the more personal it is to them, like I read this book, science fiction book lately, and it was a decent book. I would have given it a solid 3.5. What it needed, though, in the first chapter was a single paragraph to tell me why, to show me, at least, why this main character was so personally invested in completing the goal. Okay, I spent 3/4 of the book going, oh, this is just a job. This is nice. I mean, these are interesting characters in an interesting setting, I guess. But, pretty standard sci-fi fare, blah, blah, blah. And then I got to 3/4 of the way through the book, and they started explaining why this was finally showing why this was kind of personal to him. And I'm going, if I had known that back in chapter 1, I would have been like, flipping a lot faster, I wouldn't be quite so bored. So think about, what does your character want? Another book I recently read. The character wanted to go someplace. Well, within the first chapter, the author made it clear that she'd kind of given up on going to this place. And I was just like, is this a book about her finding a new goal? Because you're not explaining that very well. I want her to be after, she had this dream about going to this particular place and becoming this particular thing. Then I want the book to be her, on this journey of either, finding a new goal or finding a way around all the obstacles you're about to place in her path to get to her original dream goal, I said, well, even if you can't make this dream, this reality can be so much better, or is it, this is just a side track, and the goal, getting to the goal and getting what she really, really wants, the intensity of the wanting gives tension. So having these characters have a goal will provide structure for your story, and automatically the character finds out something, wants something, needs to do something. They have a goal to get to at the end of the story, and you just put stuff in their path to create obstacles for stuff for them to find out, and voila, all of a sudden you have a story structure, and it exists for it. So these things kind of exist. You could say, well, I'm writing a genre book and my character doesn't have to have wants or needs. Then why do I care about your character? You want me to care about your character, right? You want me to be excited about your character. Well, then you have to show me your character and your character's friends interacting with each other, and your character having wants and needs and likes and dislikes and preferences. I mean, 80,000 words is not a lot of words if you're trying for a debut book. But if I'm not there in your head with you. I can't, go, oh, this is what they're keeping in their pockets, and this is what they think about before they go to bed at night, and unless you show me in your book, this is their best friend, and this is how they act with each other with their best friend in a scene, rather than telling me, oh, this is the best friend, and, doing a little paragraph. So it's things like that where you have to, you get it all out of your head, and then you have to go back and you can look at it and go, am I clearly stating the goal within the first chapter? Like Lone Prospect. In the first chapter, it's kind of a flashback of around the middle of the book. And in the first chapter, it's an action scene. But the action scene is where the main character is asking himself, why in hell am I putting myself through this nonsense? Why am I here in the middle of this place, with bullets going over my head, why am I doing this? And, he has a couple answers for himself, Is it the girl? Well, it can't be the girl. I just met the girl. I've already been here a week. I just met the girl. Why am I putting myself through this? It's not the money. And by the end of the book, he has to decide, is putting himself through what's going to happen, all the, I'm not going to call it hazing, but the being picked on and, doing all this work and so on and so forth. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to stay here, or should he go back home? And if he goes back home, bad things will happen. You know, things he doesn't want. Like his mom will try to force him to marry this girl when he was with in high school, and he broke up with her, and he doesn't want to get back together with her, and you know he's gonna have to butt heads with his dad, and you know he's got all these brothers, and he doesn't want to go back home. You know, he's not sure he wants to move on. Does he really want to stay with this pack of werewolves who happen to be a motorcycle club? Does he want to do that? You know, they run a security business. So it was a man versus himself type of thing in, you know, that I put in there in the first chapter that I hoped people would notice. You know, this is the main conflict of the book, man versus himself, and because it's a character-driven book, and the rest of it is, you know, cozy slice of life drama. You know, I got the explosion out of the way in the first chapter, where he's got to decide, does he want to stick around with this bunch of misfits, or does he want to go back home to the family farm? Of course, you know, there's 2 more books, so obviously he decided to stick around. Spoiler, spoiler. So, but that's basically, you know, your characters need to have these goals, and the goals will provide structure, you know, because that's basically what they do. And readers, whether they realize it or not, they do appreciate structure and pacing, because it creates tension. You know, are they going to be able to fulfill their goals or not? And keeps them turning the page. And you want them to keep turning the page. And you want them to be connected to your characters. The other major thing is, and I've had to say this before, but it's coming up again, or it's coming back into my notice again. Settings cannot carry a book. A setting cannot carry your story. There is one caveat to this, and I pulled it off my shelf already. So this is called The Carnivores of Light and Darkness. It's The Journeys of the Catechist by Alan Dean Foster. And the characters are kind of like interesting archetypes of a sort. They're rather compelling, but the plot is a very stereotypical. Some guy washes up on shore, and he wants this stranger that he's just met to travel to go and rescue this beautiful woman from an evil sorcerer across the sea and take her home. And then he dies. So it's a very, you know, very, very stereotypical plot. And as this guy journeys, he meets up with new people to join, you know, and a couple of them join his little group. You know, he's like, I'm not intending to have a group, but okay. You know, because he saves a couple people's lives, and they're like, well, we're going to stick with you. And one is like, you're after treasure, right? And he's like, no, I'm not after treasure. I've been prophesied to die, you know? But what this book was a really interesting, intriguing setting where you didn't know what was going to happen next. Like, in the beginning, you know, he enters the forest, he meets up with a group of monkeys, and he has to help the monkeys out, the talking monkeys, they talk. And then he's walking in the forest, and he comes up across this, like, weird to him kind of fence in the forest, and there's a break in it. So he jumps the break of the fence, and, you know, it's broken, and it's like, we know it's concrete. He doesn't know it's concrete, and he jumps the fence, and he ends up in another world where, you know, the fence is actually part of the edge of a highway. And he jumps back through the fence, and he's back in the forest again. You know, and it's just kind of, and it just gets, you know, progressively more interesting from there. Like, he starts off, okay, this is kind of a normal world. And then the more you travel, the more out of, you like, so we're in a part of the world now where they there's a fish flying in the air. Like, it's the air is so humid the fish can fly in it and live in it. Or, you're in this middle of a marsh and you can't cross the marsh because there's all sorts of horses in the marsh. Or you get, you're going across the sea. So he uses this kind of plot trope of, there's this guy who had all the winds in the bottle. So they break open the winds in the bottle, and he releases all the winds, starting up this storm, and they have to find a safe place in the hollow of the sea. And once they fix the boat, now they have to get out of the boat. So they have to figure out how are they going to do this, and they eventually, talk to some specific sea creatures who talk to somebody else who talks to somebody else, and they learn about jet propulsion. And Kraken likes coffee. Okay. So it just gets progressively more interesting the further along you get. And that is how, the plot is, you're just journeying from place to place to go rescue this beautiful woman from the evil sorcerer. The question is this sorcerer really evil, or does he, just use disturbing magics and stuff like that? And does the beautiful woman even want to return home? That is a good question. Doesn't matter. But the journey through the setting is interesting and intriguing enough. It will keep you turning pages. Whereas um, in most books, and I mean, this is a high bar to set. In most books, your setting cannot carry your story. It just doesn't work that way. Like, you need to think of your setting. Think of your setting as a character. Your setting as character. Like, that's one thing I learned from watching or listening to the Firefly pilot commentary. Whatever you think about Joss Whedon, is they really thought about the Firefly, the ship, as a character. The inside of the ship, the setting was a character in the show. So when you're putting together your setting, and this, like I said, this is a high bar. Your setting needs to exist, so you don't have blank world syndrome, but your setting needs to provide atmosphere and tone, and give the vibe that you're going for in your book. Like, the setting in The Lone Prospect is like a small city that is kind of like this mix of old Western and modern kind of suburbia, and they're very, very specific about they don't want chain restaurants or malls, and they don't want big advertisements in their town, because they want their town to feel like a small town that just happens to have 20,000 people in it. But they want neighborhoods so people can help each other, versus a big sprawling city feel where everybody's like a stranger and cold. So you want this warm kind of, I wanted this warm Western cozy type of feeling, versus a big modern city with glass skyscrapers, which do exist in the world. It's just they don't visit very often. So you think of your setting when you're editing, think of your setting as a character in your book. And like, what does your setting need to provide color and life and whatever. But that setting at the same time cannot carry book unless you're Alan Dean Foster and you're doing something really out of the box, floating marshes, all this water, globs and globs of water floating into the air with dolphins jumping from water to water, and there's fish in there, and some of them have little islands. Completely crazy type of stuff, So you gotta, you have to, each of these things kind of builds on each other, the settings and the characters and your plot, all are kind of like these building blocks that you have to make sure they're all in place properly when you're editing. When you're doing the first draft, I don't care. Just do whatever you like. When you're going into the second draft and you're editing, this is when you start to find out, where does your story actually begin? Who is the main character? Is my setting, do my rules of my setting work? Do my, have I shown everything working before I start breaking crap? What do my characters want as goals? What are their favorite things? Why are they dressing the way they dress? How does their dress convey character? That's what you're starting to do in editing. It's a lot of the slowing down in the description, do I need this information here? Can I rip it out and put it someplace else? That type of thing. So a good editor will work with you, okay? A good editor, a good reading group of people who know your genre, love your genre, and are willing to give you feedback on your book, they'll be willing to work with you and be like, we know what you're trying to say, we know what you're trying to do, this is not working in what you're trying to do. We don't, a good editor, if they have a lot of writing experience, will be able to tell you, maybe this will help, maybe you need to think about this, and they might not tell you exactly what to do, they're not going to hold your hand, but they're going to give you some ideas of how to, here's some alternatives to what you can do. When I was writing The Lone Prospect, and I was working with Becca, my editor, with this, yes, as a development editor, I have an editor. And when I was working with her with this, I was pretty clear on my vision that I wanted to take kind of like the action sections of Jim Butcher's The Hairdressing Files and combine it with the family drama style of Anne Bishop without all of her dark fantasy hang-ups. I was very clear. I'm in my vision, I'm talking about the themes of family, and I wanted to show the wacky hijinks of this crew of werewolves who happen to be bikers. This pack of werewolves that happen to be bikers. And a pack of werewolves is just basically family with siblings that squabble. And I was like, I really want to pull away from traditional werewolf tropes. I want to give them more. I want to see what happens when you blend human psychology with wolf psychology. How does wolf behavior change human behavior? Because wolves are very family oriented. So and there's not really a lot of sexism in a wolf pack. There's no room for it. So I really wanted to know, how would werewolves who were wolves who think more of the group, of the family, how does that change the dynamics of specifically the American type of family, which puts the individual over society? how would this kind of combine together? How would it change their behavior? And talk about families and relationships and stuff like that. It's not, it has urban fantasy trappings, but it's not urban fantasy mysteries, because it's kind of based more in like Sons of Anarchy, which was a television drama, and explosions from the Expendables. See, I can do this with both authors and with movies, which is just the awfulness of comps. And I was very clear to Becca about this, because if I had not been clear to her about my vision of a cozy slice of life drama, even though we didn't talk about it in those terms back then, if I hadn't been clear to her with that, we would have been having a lot of arguments, as she would try to push me in the urban fantasy genre direction, of my mentor has died and now I have to solve, and I've been accused and now I have to solve the mystery of who killed my mentor without being, caught myself, type of thing. Or choose whatever urban fantasy debut book trope you like. We would have had a whole bunch of arguments. And she was talking about, yeah, if you were writing this in class, my professors would have a whole bunch of arguments too about it. And I'm like, yeah, I know. That's why I'm not in a master's program for English here, because but we didn't have arguments about it. I did have to go back and like cut up things and make sure, that cut up things and find the actual beginning of the story. And even though I was like, now I gotta jump back to when he first shows up, but kind of thing, or when he's first kind of accepted as part of, somebody who wants to join this pack. I was just very much, where is it first clear in a interesting, intriguing, plot hooky way that, he's questioning why is he even here? Why is he doing this? And that was all editing. Like, it was all like, I was talking to her, do I need to take this out? Should I take, or should, does this really need to be there? Should I take this? Well, this is supposed to move along this, that, or the other thing, type of thing. Because if it moves along something with characters, it's still moving your story forward. So, because I was clear on my vision, we didn't argue about it, okay? So one of those things you have to think about, you have to sit down, and you really do need to think about this, is, ask yourself, do you have a vision of your story? What type of story is this supposed to be? And I put this stuff in like writer terms, like, is it a character-driven story? Is it a plot genre story? Is it slice of life, or is it, fast-paced, constantly going type of story? If you know what you want out of your story, the mystery, or the action, or the romance, why can't they be together now, type of thing, you'll have a lot easier time being able to work with and talk to an editor about it. And this also requires knowing your writing style. I understand that I am kind of this slice of life, almost romantic comedy style writer, and I have worked hard to be able to include action into my stories. Action is kind of tough, but I understand my own writing style, and I can explain it to other people what my writing style is, in a way that, if I had to work with an editor who was actually willing to sit there and listen to me, you actually ask those questions, I would be able to explain to them, this is the vision for the story, this is my writing style, this is the vision for the story, and I need you to help me, figure out which sections I really like this section, but is it necessary? Or is it, massive info dumping and just slows the story down? I know I have some massive info dumping in the back of this book, but before he makes this decision, but I do try to do it in an interesting way. Uh, you know, like, a good editor is going to work with you and give you more than just cookie cutter advice. Like, I don't think your story begins here. Read your story out loud. Yeah, okay, I could go to any website and get that for free. I don't need you to be telling me this. I need you to be paying attention to the story. Alright, all I've gotten out of you is you're a little confused about my terminology, so I'll have to explain better. But, things like that. A good editor will work with you, and they won't put you down, So many people are afraid of hearing from an editor that their idea is stupid or their story is bad. And I don't believe in stupid ideas, and I don't believe in bad stories. I believe in, editing. I believe in, polishing your work and thinking about who are you trying to sell your work to. Like, okay, if you want to write like Rothfuss, I will help you write like Rothfuss. I might have to go buy or go pick up Rothfuss from the library, skim him, and be like, okay, I get where his writing style is. I can help you, type of thing. If you're saying I want to write epic fantasy, I will help you write your epic fantasy. I'm just gonna make sure that if you have all this description and all this world building and stuff, that you put it in a world building document. Please, please, please make a lore book for your epic fantasy book, and B, that you bring this information up when it's important. We don't need a huge info dump in chapter 1. We need to know this information as your character goes to different places. It's fine for your character to know all this crap. It's fine if you're an omniscient narrator, it's fine for your omniscient narration to know all this stuff. But you gotta put it in a place where the reader actually cares about it and will remember it later. So if you put it in the very beginning and it's not important to them, they're either going to skim over it until they find what is important, or they're going to they'll read it and they'll probably forget it. So you'll be getting to the end of the story and they'll have to flip back to the beginning to be like, what was this again? Why are we here? Type of thing. So that's what a good editor does. They work with you to fulfill your vision, to fulfill your goals. Okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to write what you love. I want you to write what makes you happy. I want you to write what you want. I want you to do that in the first draft. Experiment, do whatever, go crazy in the first draft. And then edit. It's not about you. It's not that your ideas are bad or your story is bad or whatever. It's about making it so other people can read it, consume it, understand it, enjoy it, get excited about it just as much as you do. That's, the miracles of editing your work. It's never about you and your ego. It's always about, taking the things that you that are in your head and you might have skimmed over and been like, oh, I know this, let me just keep going. Even like character stuff, character relationships and stuff like that. It's we're not in your head. As a reader, I'm not in your head. I'm not psychically connected to you. So that's what editing is about. Like taking the things that you take for granted and putting them into the book and ordering the book and everything in such a way that readers will keep turning the pages till the end. So they find out what happens. And they love all your characters because they're, complex. They're not flat as pancakes. In an interesting setting that has character itself and conveys the tone of your story. Like if Silent Hill was just a plain old town, it wouldn't be Silent Hill, now would it? You know, it wouldn't. If you go into an insane, you know, an abandoned insane asylum and it's pristine and it doesn't have like bricks everywhere and graffiti on the walls and you know, why are you even going in there? Why, you know, why do you want to go into an empty body chute? There should still be beds in the body chute. Make it creepy. Like have an owl in the nesting somewhere in the building, or you know, maybe there's some homeless people living there. What that's what I did, you know. So write what you want, write what you love, write what makes you happy, and then edit. Okay? All I ask, please. I want to finish all your books. You have these great ideas inside you, and I really want to read them, and I want to get to the end because I love your characters and I'm excited about them. Okay? So thanks for living. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves. Bless, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.